Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the maximum stake on fixed odds betting terminals will be reduced to £2 under new rules announced by the government. At the moment, people can bet up to £100 every 20 seconds. And it's been claimed the machines can lead to gambling addiction. The Association of British Bookmakers has warned that there could be job losses and argued the problem of gambling addiction was a lot more complicated than just cracking down on the machines.
I think problem gambling is a much more complex problem than is associated with just one product. You look at your average problem gambler, they'll bet online, they'll bet in casinos, they'll bet in amusement arcades, and yes, they'll bet in betting shops. So what's needed if the government's to get a comprehensive solution to problem gambling is measures that work across industry, help identify problem gamblers wherever they are gambling, and gets the resources and the support to them to help them cure their addiction.
Well, joining me now is Matt Zarb-Cousins, who is a spokesman for the Campaign for Fairer Gambling, and here in the studio, Mark Littlewood, who's the Director General of the Institute for Economic Affairs. Welcome to both of you today. Matt, first of all, is this really going to curb people's gambling addiction? People will just go and gamble elsewhere.
Well, people who are already addicted might well go and gamble elsewhere. Hopefully they go and gamble on safer products, such as over the counter, or gamble on the machines at £2 a spin. But what this is about really is preventing addiction, and in order to do that we have to acknowledge that the product itself plays a part in inducing and exacerbating gambling-related harm. And when you allow machines up to £100 a spin that facilitate roulette in high street betting shops, easily accessible environment, then we're the only country in the world that allows casino games in easily accessible environments at 3 spins a minute, and that is going to create more addicts, and that's the point of this measure. It's to prevent addiction. Right.
I mean, Mark Littlewood, I mean, it is quite incredible that you can spend that much money in such a short space of time. Even at a practical level, you'd think, well, actually, just by reducing it to £2, you're going to lose less.
Well, you can spend a lot more than that money in a casino.
Sure, but this is about easy accessible machines, isn't it?
You'll find casinos in London not many miles from here, Joe. You can walk straight into, put £10,000 on a spin of a roulette wheel if you want.
I wouldn't know.
We're just going to find displacement activity here. It is relatively easy to walk into a bookmaker's on a high street. It is even easier to switch on your computer and have it wired up to the internet at home. So my challenge would be this. We've seen basically flatlining in terms of the problem gambling population. It's about 0.6% of adults and has been consistently for about the last 20 years. If this measure works, we would expect that number to fall. And if that number hasn't fallen within the next, say, 5 years, presumably we will repeal this measure.
Right,
No,
Matt Zarb-Cousins?
Because only 1 to 2% of the population are problem gamblers, but 2 million people experience harm. What we need to do, if we're going to determine policy, is to look at the level of harm associated with fixed odds betting terminals, and only 1 to 2% of the population play fixed odds betting terminals, so it's not going to make a huge difference in the whole population rate of problem gambling, but it will make the machines less harmful, and we know that problem gamblers lose more on these machines than several leading gambling activities combined. And when someone goes into a betting shop for the first time, they don't go in to bet on fixed odds betting terminals. They don't advertise the machines. They go in to bet over the counter, and then the staff give them free credit and try and entice them onto the machines, and then they get addicted to roulette. So look, people will still go in betting shops, but bookmakers need to return to bookmaking. That's what they're licensed for.
No.
Well, Matt seems a bit confused about the efficacy of this policy. This is either going to get problem gambling down, or it isn't.
It's going to reduce the harm.
Well, there are some trade-offs here. I know the Association of British Bookmakers have said that up to 21,000 jobs of people who work in bookmakers could be on the line. 4,000 shops could close down. The Exchequer could lose £400 million in tax revenue. I would expect some pretty spectacular improvements in problem gambling for that rate of economic damage. And there is a straight trade-off.
Right, well, is there a straight trade-off, Matt?
Mark, I mean, you're an economist, allegedly, so you would know that if 1 to 2% of the population play fixed odds betting terminals and 480,000 people in the country are problem gamblers, it's not really, even if the level of harm associated with this particular product is reduced significantly by this measure, it's not going to necessarily reduce the overall population rate of problem gambling significantly. What it will do is prevent people getting addicted to this particular product, which we know is the most addictive form of gambling if you take into account the fact that 43% of people that use fixed odds betting terminals are problem or at-risk gamblers, and they lose more on this product than several leading gambling activities combined.
Well, it's rather making my point for me. It may very well be that you don't, in future, have problem gambling associated with fixed odds betting terminals. But very likely these people will just be a displacement onto more people having problem gambling in casinos, more people having problem gambling online and the rest of it. So you have to actually have some judgment about the total number of people you're going to help.
All right, well, Matt, take us through, because you have some experience as to what it's like to actually use and play these machines. I mean, if we take Mark Littlewood's general point that actually you're just going to displace the activity, you will build up problem gamblers elsewhere. What's it like using the machines that you want to see banned?
Well, look, when you start gambling on these, well, you go into a betting shop for the first time, you want to bet on sports or racing, and then you see the machines, obviously they give you free credit, and you start betting what you can afford. No one sets out to be a problem gambler or get addicted to gambling. But because of the nature of the product, the fact that it's 3 spins a minute, it's very fast, it's very high stakes, you can stake from £1 up to £100 a spin. Look, it's incredibly addictive and enticing. Look, what I'm saying is, if regulation is needed elsewhere, look, stake reduction we know is the most effective way of reducing harm associated with a particular product. That's what the research shows, and that's what the government's acted on. And if that needs to be applied to other modes of gambling, then so be it.
All right, let me bring our other guests in. Aisha, first of all, do you back what the government is doing?
Yeah, I do. It's absolutely the right decision. And also I do pay tribute to Matt. He's campaigned really long and hard for this. And to take some mea culpa, I think the last Labour government did make a mistake by, deregulating this to this degree, and there was a proliferation of these sort of machines. But I think to Mark's point about the economics, I think there is a knock-on benefit which you might not be readily able to capture immediately in terms of, if you look at the sort of opportunity, cost and damage of a lot of the effects of gambling, it is a blight on people's lives. It can affect their mental health. People can become so addicted they sort of lose their jobs. There is a big kind of
there's
social...
a cost to society.
There is a cost. And
although
I
it hasn't worsened since the rates of problem gambling were the same in 1997 when Labour came to power. So it's not obvious that actually the gambling liberalisation under the Labour government from 1997 onwards worsened the problem in aggregate.
The ease at which people can get into, as you said about the casino, you're right. I mean, it is a wee bit, like if we wanted to go and do a bit of gambling, then we'd have to put a bit of effort into it. We could go into a betting shop really, really easily and get onto one of these machines. So there are some natural obstacles.
Not so much on your computer, which you can switch on immediately.
No,
right,
I do, and I think that's the next thing that needs to be looked at.
Can I just talk about addiction? I mean, listening to this discussion, do you accept and agree with Matt that the way these particular machines are devised leads to a much quicker route to addiction?
Yeah, I think the clinical literature on that is clear, and the machines are designed precisely for that purpose. They use a kind of reinforcement strategy that can hook people in very rapidly. And the problem with them often is that they're people who have cognitive impairments or who are elderly, who are suffering from cognitive control problems, are particularly susceptible.
Right, so would you support regulation, tighter laws to restrict and, on this case, obviously bring the stakes right down?
Well, it seems to me at least that bringing the stakes down helps minimize the potential for harm for the populations that I just described.
What about banning the machines altogether?
Well, that's a more complicated issue. I don't know enough about the particulars of these machines in the context of the gambling industry here to say anything particularly intelligent about that.
Right. I mean, the thing is, the machines aren't being banned, so it is just about the stakes coming down. So I don't quite see what the problem is broadly in terms of people still being allowed to gamble.
I think it will effectively be a ban. My understanding of the monies behind this, that if you cut the stake by that much, the profit margin collapses, these machines become non-viable. So you can actually effectively ban products and services by fixing prices, even if you haven't actually legally prohibited them. So most likely, my judgment would be these machines will be ripped out of the high street. And most likely, unless we're actually going to ban the ability to go to a computer and find a roulette wheel, then we're only banning a particular type in high street.
The question is, in part, is there any social good that these machines produce? you could argue that the government needs to allow and regulate gambling because that's the least amount of harm that can be done, given that people are likely to do it anyways. But it's very difficult to make a case that there's any social good that's associated with gambling.
Right.
A lot. I would say. I mean, I spend most of my annual leave in Las Vegas. I love it. I get fun out of it. Right. It produces jobs for croupiers and bar
you can
staff
obviously control yourself.
The overwhelming majority of people can. So gambling per se, I think, is a good. It is a social and an economic good. It brings fun to a lot of people and it creates a lot of jobs and economic activity.
Matt, do you agree with Mark that actually it is an effective ban? I mean, would you like to see the government be even tougher when it comes to these kinds of machines?
It's an effective ban on the roulette content. The machines will still be slot machines and they'll still be in betting shops, B3 content, what's called B3 content. But when the bookies brought these machines in, they did so in a very much illegal grey area. They said that because the server that determines the result of each spin is outside the premises, it's the same as betting on a horse race. So therefore, that's how they sort of Trojan horsed roulette and casino games into their shops in the first place. And then it was legitimised in the 2005 Gambling Act, and the minister said, well, look, it's £100 a spin. That's quite high. It's quite unusual. If there's evidence of harm, then we can reduce the stake.
All right.
And it has taken a while, but we're back to that now.
All right, Matt and Mark, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Now, the maximum stake that people can gamble on fixed odds betting terminals has been drastically cut from £100 to just £2. The machines have been described as the crack cocaine of gambling. The government says that the move will cut the risk of harm. Now, at the moment, punters can bet up to £100 every 20 seconds on these fixed odds betting terminals. That's been cut to just £2, still every 20 seconds, which has been welcomed by campaigners. But bookmakers are warning it could cost the Treasury more than £1 billion in lost tax revenues by 2020. The Association of British Bookmakers is also warning that more than 4,000 betting shops could close, and they say as many as 21,000 people could lose their jobs.
If you have a gambler who has a problem in a betting shop, there's a very good chance they'll be identified, and there's a very good chance we can start to target the help they need at them. Moving them into other environments where there are less protections, where staff aren't trained in the way ours are, that actually can potentially be more risky. The government's advisor, the Responsible Gambling Strategy Board, said of a £2 stake, the unforeseen consequences of this could in and of themselves be more dangerous.
A bit earlier, we spoke to David Bradford. His 30-year gambling addiction bankrupted his family and landed him in jail. He welcomes today's move, but says more could be done to prevent problem gambling.
These machines really, for me, were an introduction into sort of high-powered, very frenzied, in a sense, betting. But for me, they were a stepping stone, actually, for moving on to online gambling, which, in my opinion, is something that the government will still need to address. And particularly, there could be a fallout of betting addicts, if you like, moving across to online, where there are still opportunities to bet big. The pathway that I went down was obviously more and more deluded, always thinking the next bet was going to be the winner, and therefore wherever I could get my funds from to enable that is what I ended up doing. And unfortunately, the very last thing I did before I stopped gambling was end up in prison for stealing from my employer. Something I'm not proud of and something I still don't properly understand. Which probably leads me on to another point, that there's very little support for people like me that have got the problem and want to get out of it.
Well, let's talk about this a bit more. Joining us is Matt Zarb-Cousin, a campaigner at Stop the FOBT, Fixed Odd Betting Terminals, and Christopher Snowden, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Gentlemen, welcome. I know this isn't the first time you've spoken today, so let's dive straight into it. I'll start with you, Matt. Hearing David's words there, you're saying that this is a good step, but essentially it didn't stop him gambling. It wouldn't have stopped him gambling because he went elsewhere.
I think it's an interesting word he used, gateway. And I think that what the government have done today with their announcement is have acknowledged that the role of the product in inducing and exacerbating gambling-related harm, And if you look at the fixed odds betting terminals, take that product, for example, it's the worst in terms of the losses from problem gamblers. They lose more on this product than several leading gambling activities combined. And 43% of people that use these machines are problem or at-risk gamblers. And that's why last year, 230,000 sessions resulted in a loss of more than £1,000. Now, of course, the stake reduction isn't going to solve problem gambling, but what it will do is reduce the harm associated with this particular product and prevent people getting addicted to gambling. That's the purpose of, that should be the purpose of government policy.
OK, will it, Christopher, prevent people getting addicted to gambling?
No, and I think your item's already correct in saying people are obviously going to go online. I'm sorry. People are obviously going to go online. And
Third time lucky, Christopher.
People are obviously going to go online. I think that's been accepted already. The big story in gambling over the course of the last 15 years has not been the rise of fixed odds betting terminals. It's been the rise of online. And we're trying to deal with technological change by an analog solution, banning these machines. And it is a ban, by the way. A £2 stake limit is a de facto ban. Nobody's going to want to play these machines when the stakes are so low. So we're going to drive people away to a less regulated form of gambling. And there's nothing we can do to regulate that because it's the internet. There's very little regulation you can do there.
Matt, yeah, is this a slippery slope onto the internet? A lot of people saying that you start with this and then essentially the next thing to call for is shutting down internet gambling.
Well, no one's calling for shutting down internet gambling. I mean, the government have committed in their announcement today to strengthen the protections online. Obviously, we'd like to see that go much further. We'd like to see controls on stakes and prizes online as well in future reviews. We'd like to see a statutory levy for treatment, a 1% levy so treatment has parity with drug and alcohol treatment. But we think that the harm associated with fixed odds betting terminals far outweighs that of any other product. And therefore, it is right that the government has done this as a first step. You can't deal with everything at once, we accept that. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't deal with the biggest problem.
Just looking at some of the reviews that the government have done, a triennial review in 2013, the government concluded there was little material-based robust evidence received from those concerned about the social impact of these machines. Is the evidence strong enough, Matt?
I think there's a lot more evidence that's come to the fore since. Certainly, obviously, I mean, they introduced what they called at the time player protection measures on that 2013 triennial review. They made very little difference, very little impact. Actually, the profits from FOBTs went up. They're going up year on year. About 1.8 billion was lost on them last year. It goes up every year. The level of harm has increased associated with these machines. 10% of people that use them are problem gamblers, 43% if you include at risk. So I think the stake reduction is the right move. Look, when we submitted to the consultation, we provided the government with evidence that this is the best means for reducing the harm associated with a gambling product. And that's why they've gone for £2. And it's £2 everywhere else. It's £2 in an arcade, in a bingo hall. There's no reason why bookies should be any different.
Christopher, I want to ask you about, I was reading a piece that you wrote today saying that Today shows you can get anything banned if you whine for long enough, and this is a middle-class moral panic. Expand.
Yeah, well, it's come about entirely because of a very well-coordinated campaign in which Matt's been involved. The media don't seem to ask very much about the people behind it, nor about the claims that have been made. And I've never seen any significant evidence or credible evidence at all suggesting that there's something that is so bad about these machines that they should be effectively taken off the market. I think if you gave me enough money, I could run a successful campaign and get dog racing banned or scratch cards banned. All you have to do is find somebody who's developed a problem, lost lots of money through whatever form of gambling you choose to target. You can convince MPs and the media that this is the worst thing that's happened for years, and they'll eventually ban it. And
is there not a point, though, that there are those people out there who have suffered because of this? And where are the people who are doing brilliantly off fixed odds betting machines, who want to keep them and say, you know, this is making me loads of cash and I'm doing brilliantly from it?
Well, the satisfied customers in bookies, including myself. I enjoy these machines. I'm going to miss them when they're gone. I'm going to miss having a bookie when it's gone, because they are going to close in their thousands. You can do this with any form of gambling. It's the same with alcohol. It's the same with food. You can always find somebody who has consume something to excess. But we don't generally, as a society, ban it. We try and find a reasonable middle way. I think a reasonable middle way in this instance would have been to reduce the stakes to something realistic, like maybe £20 or so. But of course, that would never have been enough for the anti-FOBT campaign.
I want to let Matt jump in here.
I think the difference is that these machines have nothing to do with traditional bookmaking. Traditional bookmaking is taking bets over the counter on racing and sports and other events. And when the bookmakers brought these machines in, they did so exploiting a loophole in the law in 2001. And they said that because the server that determines the result of each bet is outside the premises, it's the same as betting on a horse race. But actually what they were doing is just Trojan horsing casino games into their shops. And then in 2005, they were legitimised. But the minister said, crucially then, that if there is evidence of harm, look, these machines, £100 a spin, that's quite unusual. If there's evidence of harm, then the minister can reduce the stake. Now, it's taken quite a long time, but we're now in that place.
Just finally, Christopher, and quickly, if bookies existed before these machines, they'll still exist after them, surely. They were doing fine before. We can reduce the stake, they'll still do fine.
No, I don't think so. And Matt's right. This is not traditional bookmaking, but if every industry had to be traditional, they'd all eventually die out. I think if fixed odds betting terminals hadn't come along when they did, we'd have seen thousands of bookies close already. Dog racing is very much in decline. Horse racing is not doing too well. People are doing the sports betting on their mobile phones. This was a good way for a British industry to use technology in a way that benefited consumers. People can play these games on their phone or on their iPad, but they'd rather do it in a regulated environment with other people around them on the high street. And I think it's a shame they're not going to be able to do that anymore.
OK, gents, I'm really sorry we're going to have to leave it there time-wise, but thank you very much. I know you've had a long day of debating. Good to get your thoughts here on Sky News. Cheers.
Thanks, Chris.
The gambling industry is warning that tens of thousands of jobs are at risk after the government decided to reduce dramatically the maximum stake on fixed odd betting terminals. Currently, people can gamble up to £100 every 20 seconds on electronic casino games. But that's been cut to just £2 in betting shops across the UK. The terminals generate almost £2 billion in revenue for the betting industry. Amol Rajan reports.
No more bets, please. These high-stake, high-reward machines, featuring games such as roulette, are a key feature of the 8,500 betting shops on British high streets. Such shops employ over 50,000 people and pay over £1 billion in tax. For over a decade, they have allowed punters to bet £100 every 20 seconds. As a result, there were 233,000 occasions last year in which over £1,000 was lost in a single session.
Quite a big thing to do.
That's why many victims campaigned for the maximum stake to be reduced to £2. Sarah Grant from Cardiff lost everything on the machines. Now in residential rehab, she lost her job and became homeless.
When I was using them, I was in a really crappy time in my life, and to me they were like somewhere I could go, that I was accepted, that there were people willing to want to speak to me, that they were offering me drinks and different things. And it just felt like someone wanted to spend time with me.
Yeah, we've all had better days, haven't we?
Dominic Ford owns Raw Betting. He built his chain of 6 shops over a decade and spent today visiting staff to talk to them in person.
It's pretty catastrophic. It means the end of my business. We're a marginal business. The high street's tough at the moment. So take away 50% of our income, we're not sustainable.
Everything about these machines is designed to excite and reward the senses. Their defenders say that in a free society, responsible adults should be allowed to spend their money as they see fit, provided they don't harm others. But the government is now persuaded that the harm caused is immense, not just to individuals, but to those around them. Isn't there a principle here, which is that in a liberal society, responsible adults should be able to spend their money as they choose? And aren't you in danger of punishing the majority for the sins of the minority?
All the evidence was that some of the people who could least afford to lose thousands of pounds at a time were losing that sort of money on these machines. And when you find a social blight like that, I think it's our duty to stop it.
I've been an addicted gambler since I was 13. I'm bad. I'm really bad. But I've lost relationships, kids. I've lost everything. I think it'll help, because now you walk up this road now in Rochdale, it's nearly all betting shops.
It's getting that you'll never beat a bookie. You know, as you can see, everywhere you go, the main streets is full of bookies. It really is full of bookies.
But are they looking in the right place? More than 1 in every £3 lost on gambling is now online. High street and on-location betting and the National Lottery are only around a quarter each.
You can find us.
As with so many industries, new laws are struggling to keep up with digital innovation. Once upon a time, punters had to go to the bookies. Now the bets come to them 24/7, and through smartphones, children are exposed too. There are no clear and public metrics for what the government deems success from this move. Its timetable remains unclear. And while high street bookies are clobbered, taming digital gambling is the next imminent frontier. Amol Rajan, BBC News.
The government has dramatically cut the maximum stake on controversial fixed odds betting machines, saying it's taking a stand against problem gambling. The betting industry, though, has warned the move risks thousands of jobs and the future of many high street bookies. And critics say the long overdue changes will do nothing to tackle online betting. Here's our consumer editor, Chris Choi.
They are the betting machines where gamblers can lose up to £100 in just a 20-second spin. Now that maximum stake will be drastically cut to just £2. Sheffield campaigned against the machines, estimating that residents lost £13 million a year. Here, David Bradford became a problem gambler.
It's described as the crack cocaine of the gambling fraternity, and devastatingly dangerous because there's so quickly can you spend vast amount of money, and you're talking hundreds and hundreds of pounds in minutes.
Figures we've obtained show there are 33,420 fixed odds betting terminals in the UK. They yield the industry £1.8 billion a year. Betting firms now predict 21,000 jobs and 4,000 betting shops could be lost.
You've seen more bookmakers open up in areas, mainly of deprivation, and what you're seeing is huge losses on these machines by some of the most vulnerable in society.
And this industry says it now faces seismic change and job losses. Surely responsible gambling must take priority here, and you can redeploy staff and resources into games that don't have these social consequences.
The average betting shop, half its profitability comes from these machines. You remove half the profitability from any sector of the economy, you're going to see closures, you're going to see job losses.
Changes to the machines used in thousands of bookmakers won't happen this year. Industry will be given time to adapt, and this former betting shop worker says each machine can take £52,000 a year.
£52,000 in real terms equates to 2 people earning, the national average wage. So how much more money are the betting shops, the gambling providers going to receive in this year? This isn't an immediate fix, it's another delay.
But these changes don't affect online, where stakes per spin can be even higher. So this industry can still use these games as a money-making machine.
But it isn't, is it, just the fixed odds betting machines that are the problem here?
No, and also announced today a new review of the age limit for playing the National Lottery. That's always been age 16 and over. But remember, there have been so many new games and scratch cards introduced, and there has been growing concern that that too could be a gateway to gambling addiction. Also, speaking of the online problem, the Gambling Commission today said that it will strengthen online protections, a little bit lacking in detail or timetable, but that is expected to include things like stronger age verification, possibly affordability checks and that kind of thing. But there are plenty of people who have lost faith in government to act speedily on this agenda. After all, think about it, those gambling machines were first introduced in 2004. It's taken 14 years for today the government to say that they're a social menace, so it's not a quick process.
Indeed. Chris, thank you very much indeed.
It's a move that promises to take a stand against gambling addiction, but at the same time could cost 20,000 jobs. The government said today that it would cut the maximum stake someone can gamble on fixed odds betting machines from £100 to just £2. Campaigners welcomed the announcement, but Britain's bookmakers warned it would cut their profits, forcing them to close thousands of shops. Our Scotland correspondent, Kieran Jenkins, has this.
They prey on the most vulnerable, and it's going to be stopped, the government has said. The days of these casino-style machines swallowing hundreds of pounds in a matter of seconds are numbered. The maximum bet will be slashed from £100 to £2. It seemed improbable 2 months ago. When the gambling regulator recommended a £30 maximum bet, we came to Coatbridge, North Lanarkshire, and met Martin.
Before you know it, you've lost your 12 hours takings, £100 possibly, within minutes.
Who was addicted to fixed odds betting terminals and was dismayed. But today, the government has defied the regulator and the gambling industry.
It is a massive drop, isn't it?
It's a massive drop. £2 is an unbelievable gesture. It will save people from contemplating suicide. It will save marriages breaking up. It will save so much damage.
If there had been a £2 bet back when you were gambling,
yeah,
would it have made a difference?
I wouldn't have played it. I wouldn't have played it.
Gamblers repeatedly lose more than £1,000 a go at fixed odds machines. It happens over 233,000 times a year, with one gambler losing £13,000 in a single session.
Now, you pass no fewer than 5 bookmakers along this street, so there may be 20 of those fixed odds betting terminals here, taking on average £1 million of these people's money each year on the doorstep of one of Scotland's most deprived communities. That's why the government's stepping in.
You've seen more bookmakers open up in areas, mainly of deprivation, and what you're seeing is huge losses on these machines by some of the most vulnerable in society.
On the beleaguered British high street, betting shops have indeed been buoyant. But the industry now claims half of them will shut down, 4,500 closures and 21,000 jobs lost.
The average betting shop, half its profitability comes from these machines. You remove half the profitability from any sector of the economy, you're going to see closures, you're going to see job losses.
A duty hike on online gambling is also being planned to offset the tax take from these machines, which is set to tumble. Punters may move online too, or that money may remain in the pockets of those in places like this who need it the most. Kieran Jenkins, Channel 4 News, Coatbridge.